Feminist Communities for Climate Justice has been a vital space for us because it gives us the opportunity to share and develop understandings of how inequalities that we face in terms of climate action are shared by other groups. So having a space like Feminist Communities for Climate Justice has been really helpful to develop that cross-community understanding of what we need.
There are so many different problems that it's hard to know, how to best use the resources that are there. And then most of the time there are inadequate resources, in terms of funding for things or supports or public services. There's so many different things that need to be, so many gaps that need to be filled at a local level, particularly in rural areas.
We're really worried about the future for young people, for our grandkids, and for all young people. We're really worried about what the future will bring. Older people are actually one of the groups that is vulnerable in an unequal way to the impacts of climate.
Climate action and climate justice is looking at ways that we can improve things, but it is about taking the burden off individuals and moving towards a collective.
Climate change is a threat multiplier or an exacerbator of social inequality. So if there's wealth inequality, it will worsen that. If there's racism, it will worsen that. Particularly with migration, the displacement of people due to the impacts of climate change is a really big issue.
When we're talking about climate justice, you're talking about, well, it's a global problem, but it's about, fairness in how that is managed and responded to, making sure that nobody's left behind and that people who are most likely to be affected are engaged and aren't discriminated against even further. We will not fix these problems until we empower women and marginalised communities to take decisions and to have more actual power in the decision-making process.
What we see is that women use energy in different ways, they use transport in different ways, and they are still in Ireland poorer on average than men, having less access to resources like property and wealth than men. And also having lower rates of home ownership than men, which has implications for trying to retrofit rental properties, for example.
When you just say to those communities climate change, they already think it's just a secondary issue, it's something that authorities have to deal with. But when you talk about bills, you talk about mica homes in Donegal, you talk about transportation, that's when people start realizing that, oh, okay, you're talking about things that affect us on a daily basis.
Really right now, the way the government has given as a means of participation is if you can pay for it, you can take part, and including things like tax breaks or reduced prices for the adoption of things like electric vehicles and so on. That would really benefit communities who can't currently afford to buy those things. I think there needs to be kind of a reorganisation of priority from government.
So the fault is being placed on the individual and not the system, and I think that needs to change. And I think once people see that change, you will get more people on board and wanting to see the difference.
We're really focused on the Irish government and the actions of the government here in Ireland, so around things like home retrofitting, public transport, food policy, and a whole range of other policies. Any action that the government will take will have 100 times the impact of what individuals might do.
The state has adopted targets, the state knows what it has to do, the government produces a climate action plan every year, but I don't think it has communicated clearly to communities what communities can do to be part of this, to kind of accelerate the momentum and to kind of meet communities where they're at.
It's about empowering communities on the ground, not going in as like we are the experts who will solve your issues, but empowering people who are already working in communities, because I'm not going to go into an offshore island community or a traveller group and assume I know about their lived experience, because I don't. But if I can give a member of that community the tools and the knowledge to start those conversations with their communities, then they can combine that with their lived experience, which I could never have, and bring that to their decision makers.
You're listening to the people's needs and you're responding in a way that's led by the people, and sometimes that's slower maybe than what you'd like or what government or policymakers would like, but it can be more effective because it's bottom up, because you're listening and including those who are most marginalised and diverse to be part of the conversation and part of the process.
If organizations that reach out to those communities are funded, are given more funding to reach out to these, it will be easier to reach out. But if they don't have funding, how do we expect them to reach out and be able to connect the marginalized communities to the services?
Everybody should learn about community development. It should be part of your curriculum in school, because I think that would kind of help with all facets of life and what we're experiencing now in wider society. There were so many different areas of inequality that I did not know, I didn't have the language for. Now I do, by working with the feminist communities for climate justice.
Thomas níos láidir híomh na policy a scríofa le chéile, agus na acmaní atá ar fáil ó híomh na cruinithe bhí ar fáil ar Zoom, na taceocht a bhí ar fáil sa toolkits agus na labhraíonn beag. Tá siad níos rathúil mar bhí muid a comhairbriú le chéile agus in anna bheith just muid héin mar grúpa amháin, agus tá muid an labhairiste níos múdaín ar fud fád an tír go bhfuil siad níos láidir comhairbriú le chéile, cinse tá a dearfach leis an comhairbriúach seo.
I've learned that climate justice is not just about the environment, but it also goes back to changing people's daily lives.
It's about creating a spark in people on the ground, and really the goal is to create a ripple effect for us, in that we want to empower people to start having the conversations and noticing the social injustice related to climate change in their communities.